Good morning, students. Welcome to the lecture of Real Analysis 1. We will just recall the concepts we have seen in the last lecture. In the last lecture, we have started solving examples of integration by using Riemann sum method. The particular example we have seen is integration -1 to an f of x dx for f of x is equals to mod x. In this example, we have seen that how the example involving both parts of the interval, positive part and negative part of the interval involved is being solved. The method we have used is we have made n equal parts of non-negative side and n equal parts of non-positive side, and just with the similar procedure of finding the partition, finding the values of xi's, yi, delta xi, we have found the value of a Riemann sum, and finally we have taken the limit as n tends infinity. If the limit exists, we say the function is integrable, and the limiting value is nothing but the value of the integration. Under some applications, we have seen the theorem. Actually, we have proved these theorems by using Darboux sum definitions. That is, if f1, f2 are integrable, then we have already proved that f1 plus minus f2, that is addition and difference of two integrable functions, is integrable. In this theorem, we have proved integration a to b f dx is equal to integration a to b f1 dx plus minus integration a to b f2 dx by using Riemann sum definition. For this, we have initially started with a partition of the given interval with not p less than delta, and just we have written both definition of Riemann sum for both the integrable functions f1 and f2. Then by simply adding both the inequalities and with some suitable steps, we have proved that integration a to b is equal to integration a to b f1 plus integration a to b f2, and we have written the similar is true for the difference as well. Then as a corollary to this theorem, we have proved that if f1 f2 are integrable and c1 c2 any two constants, then c1 f1 plus c2 f2, the linear combination of two integrable functions, is also integrable, and integration a to b c1 f1 plus c2 f2 dx is this c1 integration f1 plus c2 integration f2. For this, we have assumed initially that this linear combination be a function f, say. Then we have started finding its Riemann sum. After finding the Riemann sum, we have seen that this Riemann sum of the function f is the linear combination of Riemann sum corresponding to the function f1 and f2. Then we have written the definitions of f1 and f2, definitions of integrability by using Riemann sum. Then we have multiplied both the inequalities respectively by c1, c2, and we have added. Here I just want to make a simple change. Whenever we are taking the mod of c1x plus c2y, it can be written less than or equals to mod c1x plus mod c2x. And here we have discussed that for positive constants c1 and c2. But the statement is equally true for the negative values also. Therefore, we will just put a modulus here. We will just put modulus as mod c1 into epsilon, mod c2 into epsilon. Therefore, what will be the effect on this inequality? Here it is mod c1 epsilon and mod c2 epsilon. Mod c1 plus mod c2. Don't worry, this will be a positive number. Multiplied by epsilon will be still a positive number. There is no effect on the proof of our theorem. This is the simple change. Student has to know this. Then we have proved that the SPF minus this term is less than by a positive number. Therefore, limit SPF exists, and hence the function f, that is a linear combination of two functions f1 f2, is integrable, and integration value is equal to this bracket, which is equal to c1 integration f1 plus c2 integration f2. Hence, we have proved it. Now, in today's lecture, we are going to the next theorem. Actually, this theorem also we have covered by using the Darboux sum. That is, if integration function is integrable over a to b, sees any point in between the interval, then the function is equally integrable on a to c and c to b. Let me write this as a second theorem. We will write the statement and we will try to understand what the proof of the theorem is. Therefore, let me write the statement: if a function f is bounded and integrable on each of the interval each of the interval, each of the intervals I will write, intervals AB, AC and CB, where C is the point of the closed interval AB. Okay, therefore, what is the given thing? It was given to us that f is bounded and integrable on every interval. This we have proved by using the Ramax sum definition, where C is the point in between. Then prove that. What to prove? Integration a to b f dx is equal to integration a to c f dx plus integration c to b f dx. This is what we want to prove. This is what we want to prove. Now to prove this statement, actually we are going to prove this by using the method of real analysis. Whenever we want to prove any numbers are equal, suppose we want to prove a number a is equal to b, then what does it mean, or what can I prove this by using mathematical analysis? We can prove this as mod of a minus b less than epsilon. Mod of a minus b less than epsilon, where epsilon be a positive number. If modulus gives me a non-negative quantity, less than by every positive, therefore we have only one option, mod of a minus b is equals to 0, which is actually giving us a is equals to b. Therefore, for proving this statement also, we are going to prove the difference between left side and right side with modulus is less than epsilon. This on this parallel a is equals to b, proving mod of a minus b less than epsilon. But before going to that, as it was given that the function is bounded and integrable on AB, AC and CB, we will just write all the definitions by using Riemann sum. Therefore, as I am writing the definitions by Riemann sum, what should be the initial writing? We have to select epsilon be a positive number. We have to select one partition, and then respectively we will write the Riemann sum definitions on the three intervals. Therefore, let me start with let epsilon greater than 0 be a given number, as f is integrable, on AB, AC and CB, comma, there exists. What exists? Yes, students, can anyone say what kind of partition is going to exist, or whether it is true for all the partitions? If I want to write second definition of Riemann sum or integrability. Hello students, is the voice clear to everyone?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Now I want to write a partition. I want to select a partition. But what is the restriction on that partition? Or whether it is true for every partition of the given interval? There exists delta greater than 0. Now it is true only for those partitions who are having norm less than delta. Correct? No? According to the definition. Delta greater than 0 such that for every partition P, what is the partition we are writing always? A is equal to x0, comma x1, comma x2, so on up to xn is equal to b, containing the point C. Because the point C we want in between A and B, na? Containing C with norm P less than delta, and for every choice of Pi. For every choice of Pi in ith subinterval xi minus 1 to xi. What is the definition by Riemann sum now? Definition says that SPF on closed interval AB minus integration is less than by epsilon. Just look at how I am writing. This is summation f of Pi into delta xi. This is SPF. No? But this SPF is now taken on which interval? Closed interval A to B minus integration a to b f dx is less than epsilon. Let me call it as statement number 1. What this statement tells me, that the function f is integrable on closed interval ab. Next, similarly we will write for closed interval ac. Function is same, f of ti, therefore the sum is f of ti into delta xi. Integration is a to c f dx less than epsilon. Let me call it as statement number 2. And what is the third one? Third one is for the interval c to b, Riemann sum f of ti delta xi minus integration c to b f dx less than epsilon. Any doubt with the steps? This is simply a definition. See, here I'll write the definition. How we are writing the definition? How we are writing? One form of writing the definition is limit. Limit norm p tends to 0 SPF is equal to integration a to b f dx. If I want to write in modulus form, this is SPF minus integration a to b less than epsilon whenever norm p less than delta. And here what I have done, simply I have replaced this sum by the actual summation value, summation f of ti into delta xi minus integration a to b f dx less than epsilon. Correct? Now this step I have used as a definition. Okay, I think there is no issue about this. Now what we are going to relate? We are going to relate this, we want to find out the relation between these sums. Can anyone tell me what will be relation between these sums? May I say first sum is addition of these two remaining sums?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes or no? Yes. But we know that. What we know? Summation on closed interval a to b f of ti into delta xi is equals to summation on a to c f of ti delta xi plus summation c to b f of ti into delta xi. You can easily observe from this real line. Na? This is the closed interval a to b and the consideration c is the point in between. Therefore, whenever I am finding any sum on this whole interval a b must be equals to sum on a to c plus sum on c to b. This is what I have written. And let me call this as statement number 4. Now we will go for the exact statement we want to prove. Now the next step we will consider is, we will consider the difference of this left hand side minus right hand side with modulus, and the aim is to prove that this difference is less than by epsilon. Therefore, what should I consider now? What should I consider? Modulus integration a to b f dx minus, let me put a bracket, integration a to c f dx plus integration c to b f dx. Okay, and what is the aim to prove? This modulus of this difference is less than by epsilon. Why? Because as epsilon is any positive number, non-negative difference less than by every positive gives you equal to 0. Now, in order to establish a relation like these definitions, what we want to introduce, we have integrations. We have to introduce sums, Riemann sums. Therefore, what I am going to do, I am going to add and subtract one summation. And what we are going to do, we are going to add and subtract sum on closed interval a to b f of ti delta xi. I have subtracted, then I am going to add the same. This is a small adjustment we have made in order to use the Riemann sum definition of integrability. Now what we have to do? We have to use this equation number 4. By using this equation number 4, summation on closed interval AB can be written as summation on AC plus summation on CB. Now I am going to write it as integration a to b f dx minus summation f of ti delta xi summation on AB. Now we are going to divide this into two parts. First part is sum on AC f of ti delta xi plus sum on CB. Students, if you are having any kind of difficulty, you can ask. You can stop me in between and ask. Steps are very easy actually if you understand the theme of the proof. Okay, what we have done? We have divided this sum into two parts. Sum on AB is equal to sum on AC plus sum on CB. Now what the job we will do? We will separate integration along with their corresponding summations on three different intervals. The first interval is AB, second is AC and CB. Therefore now integration along with their summation we will collect in brackets. If the first bracket is on AB, I will write integration a to b e of dx minus summation closed interval AB f of ti into delta xi. Okay, integration and summation on closed interval AB in one bracket we have collected. Now we will collect integration on summation on AC and integration on AC in one bracket. Therefore, let me put a bracket. This gives us summation closed interval AC f of ti delta xi minus integration a to c f dx. And what is the third part we are doing? Summation on CB plus integration on CB, we will put it in one bracket. This is summation on closed interval CB f of ti delta xi minus integration c to b f dx. Okay? Any doubt up to this? Is these steps clear for everyone?
Yes, ma'am.
Good. Now, what I am going to do? I am going to use the triangular inequality of the modulus. That is, I am going to separate these three terms in the modulus. Therefore, what is the effect on this equality?
Less equal.
Equality becomes inequality, less equal. Now we will separate those. First modulus will be integration a to b f dx minus summation over a to b f of ti delta xi. This is the first modulus added with what is the second modulus? Summation on AC f of ti delta xi minus integration a to c e of dx, and added with the third modulus will be summation. So summation on CB f of ti delta xi minus integration c to b f dx. Now it's a stage to use all the three definitions we have written initially as statement number 1, 2 and 3. What this statement number 1, 2 and 3 tells us, as f is integrable on AB, summation on AB minus integration on AB is less than epsilon. Similarly for AC and similarly for AB. And here we have the three terms similar to that only. In the first, we can interchange the positions as we are in the model. So there is more effect actually. So every term is less than epsilon. Every term in this statement is less than epsilon. But what we want? We want the value together less than epsilon. Therefore, what should be my corresponding adjustment in these definitions?
Epsilon by 3.
Epsilon by 3. Good. Therefore, I am writing here epsilon by 3, epsilon by 3 and epsilon by 3. And here finally I am going to write this is strictly less by epsilon by 3 plus epsilon by 3, which is epsilon, and the reason is from 1, 2 and 3. Okay. So what we have proved? We have proved modulus integration a to b f dx minus integration a to c f dx plus integration c to b f dx is less than epsilon. Correct na? This is our left hand side we have started with. Integration AB minus integration AC plus BC, and we have proved it as less than by epsilon. Now what is the justification? Since epsilon is arbitrary, into bracket epsilon greater than 0, therefore this quantity on the left is non-negative number, or non-negative number less than by every positive. A non-negative number, on LHS I will write, on LHS is less than by every positive number. Then what is the possibility?
It must be equal to 0.
Thus must be equal to 0. Therefore, this is equal to 0, I am saying. Na? This modulus is equal to 0. If it is equal to 0, can I write directly integration a to b f dx is equal to integration a to c f dx plus integration c to b f dx, and hence the proof of the given statement. Any doubt about this theorem?
No, ma'am.
Let me recall what we have done. Initially, we have started with a given thing that f is bounded on the three respective intervals. We have written the definition by Riemann sum. We have written. Then later we have identified that sum on AB is equal to sum on AC plus sum on AB, and just we have taken the modulus of difference between the two terms which we want to prove equal, and we have proved it as less than by epsilon. Okay, if you are not having any doubt, shall I go to the next theorem of the syllabus? And the next theorem is regarding the integrability properties. Therefore, we will give the next heading as some integrable functions. Because sometimes in our objective functions, the function was given and it was asked to check whether it is integrable or not. And if I want to check the integrability, what is the process? By Darboux sum, find upper sum, lower sum, upper integral, lower integral, check whether these two integrals are equal or not. If I want to go by Riemann sum, find the Riemann sum, take the limit. If the limit exists, it is integrable, and otherwise not integrable. But if the question is in the multiple choice, in the objective only for 1 mark, then we should have some criteria with us for checking the integrability of the given function. And this is the first criteria I can say. I will write this as theorem number 1. And the first theorem under this heading is every continuous function is integrable. Every continuous function is integrable. Whether this statement means that a discontinuous function is not integrable. Hello. I hope I am clearly audible. The statement we have written is every continuous function is integrable. My question is whether it means that not continuous, it is a discontinuous function is not integrable. Whether it's so, someone has to reply me. Either it is correct or not, doesn't matter. Try to answer.
No, ma'am.
No, it is not. Okay. We should not take this much of time to answer, I think. Correct, na? Okay. Let us prove the statement that every continuous function is integrable. What should we start with? An assumption of a continuous function. Our job is to prove the integrability. In this theorem, we are proving the integrability by using the conditions of integrability. Two forms of conditions of integrability we have proved. Na? That is mod of or UPF minus LPF is less than by epsilon. Therefore, we are proving this by using the conditions of integrability. Therefore, let me write what is given. Given that a function f, I will write, given that a function f is continuous on closed interval AB. This is the given thing, and what we want to prove? Function f is integrable on closed interval AB, no doubt by the condition of integrability. Therefore, here I want to use one more property of continuous function defined on closed interval. Whether anyone knows, if a continuous function is given on the closed interval, which property it is going to possess, or regarding uniform continuity, I can say. Or straight, I will ask a question. If the function is continuous on closed interval, whether it will be uniformly continuous? You have to answer in either yes or no. You have only two possibilities to answer. A continuous function defined on closed interval AB, whether it is uniformly continuous or not.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, it is uniformly continuous. Now we are using this property and we are writing the definition of uniform continuity. Okay. Here I will write, since the function is continuous on closed interval, comma, the function is uniformly continuous. I think we have discussed already what is the definition of uniform continuous. Uniformly continuous on closed interval AB. Therefore, let me write the definition of uniform continuity. Epsilon we are not going to use because epsilon we are using for proving the condition of integrality. Therefore, here I will use some another positive number, say eta. Therefore, here I will write by definition of uniform continuity. By definition of uniform continuity, for every eta greater than 0, there exists delta greater than 0 such that, what such that? Students, what is the definition? We don't know anything, ma'am. You should write only. Is the definition true?
Yes, ma'am.
Mod ft1 minus f2. Actually, we are using less than epsilon, but epsilon we want to use for the another purpose. That's why I'm writing this to be another positive number, eta. Eta greater than 0. For every eta greater than 0, there exists delta greater than 0 such that mod ft1 minus mod ft2 less than eta for t1 minus t2 less than delta, and this is for any t1 t2 in the closed interval AB. Let me call this as statement number 1. Now we will choose a partition whose norm is less than delta. If the norm is less than delta, may I say this is going to satisfy this restriction? Choose a partition P. Choose a partition P with norm P less than delta. With norm P less than delta. Okay. Whenever I'm saying norm P is less than delta, means the distance between what is norm definition actually?
Length of maximum
largest subinterval is less than delta. What about the remaining subintervals then? I say this is still
It holds.
less than delta.
Yes,
Yeah, it holds for the remaining. If the length of every subinterval is less than delta, therefore, if I select any 2 points between the interval, therefore, may I say this condition is going to satisfy?
Yes,
What I
ma'am.
wanted to tell you is, this is the partition we are selecting, say, okay, and this be my length of largest subinterval, say delta. What about remaining subintervals? All the remaining subintervals will also follow the length less than delta. Therefore, if I take any arbitrary interval, say this interval I am taking, okay, and let me write T1, T2 be any 2 points, then may I say the distance between these two T1, T2 must be less than delta, because the
Yes,
node we
ma'am.
have selected less than delta. And if this condition holds, may I say this left part is going to hold, that is difference between their function values is less than eta. Correct or not? Difference between their function values is less than eta. Therefore, now I am going to write it for ith subinterval. I am going to write it for ith subinterval. Distance between the length of ith subinterval is no doubt less than delta. Therefore, for any 2 points, if I select in that ith subinterval, this difference between the function values is less than epsilon. Therefore, may I say, as the notation we have used capital Mi for the suprema of F in ith subinterval. Similarly, we have used Mi as the infima. Therefore, this statement is giving me the conclusion that capital Mi minus small mi must be less than eta, because for ith subinterval this condition is going to hold. Right? So here shall I write from equation 1 we have what we have in from equation number 1. May I write capital Mi minus small mi strictly less than eta, and this is for I equals to 1 to n. I am not writing the modulus, though we have a modulus here, because we know always the suprema is greater equal by infima, and this is giving me a non-negative value. Try to understand from this mod ft1 minus mod ft2, we are writing capital Mi minus small mi is less than eta, because as the function is continuous, these capital Mi and small mi must be the function values. Correct na? Why I am saying these are the function values? Because the function is given to be continuous. Or here I can show in the sketch itself. Suppose this is the curve. This is our closed interval AB. And suppose somewhere here is the ith subinterval we have selected. Ith subinterval xi minus 1 to xi. Then whatever is the suprema, whatever is the infima, this is the suprema. Whether the suprema is a function value or not? Yes, it is the function value.
Yes.
Similarly, what about the infima? This infima is also a function value. Therefore, may I say this f of xi minus f of xi minus 1. Of xi minus f of xi minus 1. Here, if the function is increasing, mi is f of xi. If it is decreasing, exactly reverse. Therefore, anyhow, this mi is some function value, correct? And small mi is also another function value, and we are writing the difference between the function values is less than eta. For here I can conclude capital Mi minus small mi is less than epsilon. No need to write modulus, because mi is always greater or equal by small f. Suprema is always greater or equal by infima. Is this point clear to everyone? From the definition of uniform continuity, we have concluded this result. Now we will go for considering the left part of the condition of integrability. What is the left part of the condition of integrability? What is the aim to prove? UPF minus LPF is less than epsilon. Therefore, I will start with UPF minus LPF, and the aim is to prove this difference is less than by epsilon. We know according to the definition, this is summation I equals to 1 to m capital Mi delta xi minus summation I equals to 1 to n small mi delta xi. Let me combine the sum to write this as capital Mi minus small mi into delta xi. I have not given the number. Let me call this as 2. Therefore, from 2 what we have written? Capital Mi minus small mi is strictly less than by eta. Therefore, may I write this is strictly less by summation eta times delta xi. Now this number eta, here the reason is from 2. Now we know this number eta is independent of I. Therefore, let me take it outside the summation. Therefore, we have the term now n times summation I equals to 1 to n delta xi. Now, what is summation delta xi? For the closed interval AB, sum of length of all subintervals. What is the value?
Close interval AB.
Is it b minus a?
B minus A.
Yes, ma'am.
Length of the closed interval AB, right? Length of the closed interval AB. What is the aim to select to prove this number eta times b minus a is less than by epsilon? Correct now? For initially, whatever eta we have written, we will choose the number eta such that this is going to be less than epsilon. Therefore, here I will write for instead of for what I will write, okay, for epsilon greater than 0 be given, okay, then let us choose, then let us choose eta which we have written initially itself. Let us choose eta such that, what such that? Eta times b minus a is less than epsilon. We want to select a number. Now we will check with a simple example whether such eta is going to exist or not. Okay, suppose we are describing this for the interval 1 to 10. For the interval 1 to 10, and if suppose epsilon is given to be 1, now our aim is to check whether such eta is going to exist or not. Now what we want to find? Eta into b minus a. What is b minus a? 10 minus 1 less than epsilon. What is epsilon? We have selected 1. Fine. Therefore, what is the value of eta? 9 eta is less than 1. Therefore, eta must be less than 1 by 9. Therefore, whenever this situation occurs, we are going to select this number eta less than by 1 by 9. Here itself. Here we are writing for every eta greater than 0. Next, we have made a conclusion that this eta must be less than eta into eta upon b minus a. Therefore, for every positive number epsilon, there exists such eta for this statement, for this inequality. Therefore, what we have proved, the sum of equation becomes thus above equation becomes, what this above equation becomes now? UPF minus LPF. This number we have selected to be less than by epsilon. Therefore, we have proved that UPF minus LPF is less than epsilon. Therefore, may I say, thus the function f is integrable. Thus the function f is integrable on closed interval AB. Therefore, what we have proved? Every continuous function is integrable. And to prove this, we have just made use of the property that continuous function on closed interval is uniformly continuous. And the whole proof of the theorem depends on this uniform continuity definition. Yes, any doubt about the proof? Student side.
No, ma'am.
Okay, if not, let us go to a third theorem. In the third, sorry, not third, it's the second theorem. In the second theorem, now we are proving that a monotonic function is integrable. Can anyone tell me what is monotonic function? The statement of the theorem is a function f is monotonic on closed interval AB, then prove that it is integrable on integrable on closed interval AB. Yes, from student side, what is monotonic function?
Either increasing or decreasing.
Yes, this is monotonically increasing or monotonically decreasing. Do you know what is the exact meaning or what is the difference between monotonically increasing and strictly increasing? Monotonically increasing, monotonically decreasing. That's true. There are two types. But what the word monotonic means, or whether it is strictly increasing function and strictly decreasing function. Hmm? If I want to tell you by graph, suppose this is the graph. Suppose I have this function from closed interval a to b. What kind of function it is? Whether it is strictly increasing or monotonically increasing? Hmm? Question for this graph. Whether it is monotonically increasing or strictly increasing. That's why I have asked you what do you know the difference between monotonically increasing and increasing? See, the difference is very simple. Whenever I am saying monotonically increasing function, means any two function values in between may be equal, but in strictly increasing, no two function values are going to be same. But if you look at this sketch, whether any two function values are going to be same, start from A
No.
and go towards B, whether any two function values are equal,
No.
no. Therefore, this is an example of strictly increasing
Strictly.
function. Strictly increasing function. And suppose if I have a function of this type, suppose this is a to b and suppose somewhere here it is constant and then again increasing. Okay, now look at this sketch. The two function values are same, na? Or other many points are there for which the function values are going to be same. Therefore, for two different values of the interval, corresponding function values are same. That is, function is going to be constant or same for these two. Means sometimes increasing, sometimes constant, and then increasing again. Then this is a type called as monotonically increasing. Monotonically increasing. And if I want to write in the mathematics language, suppose we have made the partition with points say x naught less than or equals to x1 less than or equals to x2. Suppose these are the points we have less than or equals to xn. Then what strictly increasing means? The function strictly increasing means that f of x naught strictly less by f of x1, strictly less by f of x2 continues strictly less by f of xn. That of monotony increasing means f of x naught less equal by f of x1. F of x1 less equal by f of x2 and continue less equal by f of xn. Is the point clear to everyone? The difference between
Yes,
strictly
ma'am.
increasing and monotonically increasing. And same is true for monotonically decreasing and strictly decreasing. Now, in order to prove the theorem, in our case, we will start with the monotonically increasing function. Once I prove for monotonically increasing, equally it is true for monotonically decreasing function. Therefore, let me start with a monotonically increasing function. Here I will write, we shall prove the theorem when, or considering when f is monotonic increasing. Monotonic increasing on closed interval AB. Now, what about boundedness? Because to prove integrability, first we have to ensure the function is bounded or not. Therefore, here it is given only monotonically. Monotonic, either increasing or decreasing. What about boundedness? Whether these functions are bounded? Students, I don't know what happens today. Why you are not responding? Whether a monotonically increasing or decreasing function is bounded or not. Look at the statement I have written now.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes,
What does it
ma'am, it is
say? What
bounded.
is my lower bound? F of x naught. What is the upper bound?
F of x n.
Correct, na? Or if I write this as a, this is f of a, na? And this is equal to f of b. Therefore, f of a is the lower bound, f of b is the upper bound for monotonically increasing function. What about monotonically decreasing function? What will be upper bound? Is it f of a? What
Yes,
about
ma'am,
the lower bound?
F of B.
Good. For here already the monotonically increasing statement gives that the function is bounded. Therefore, nothing to prove actually. We can write simply as monotonically increasing on closed interval, hence it is bounded. Therefore, I am just writing as f is monotonically increasing function on closed interval AB, which implies f is bounded on closed interval AB. It is bounded on closed interval AB. Now we will consider the partition. Let P equal to x naught comma x1 dot dot up to xn equals to b be the partition of the closed interval AB. Now, whenever I am selecting these points in the partition, what the fact is known to us? Therefore, can I write x naught less than or equals to x1 less than or equals to x2 less than or equals to xn. Okay. Now, as the function is monotonically increasing, may I write f of x naught less than or equals to f of x1 less than or equals to f of x2 less than or equals to, and continue less than or equals to f of xn. Let me call it as statement number 1. Okay. Where xi be a point of closed interval AB and I is equals to 0, 1, 2, up to n. All these are the points of the closed interval AB. Correct? Now we will go to find out the upper sum and lower sum, because again we want to prove the function is integrable by condition of integrability. Therefore, to prove the condition of integrability means actually we want to prove UPF minus LPF is less than epsilon. So first we will find out UPF and LPF. Before going to UPF and LPF, can anyone tell me what will be capital Mi and small mi in this case? Here only I will write be a partition with norm norm p less than delta. I will write since f is monotonically increasing. Yes, what is the suprema in ith subinterval?
B.
Hmm? Is it b or function I am asking?
F of x n.
F of, can you repeat please?
F
What
of
is,
x n.
yes, it is f of xi. Good. And what about infima?
F of x
xi
naught.
minus
F of xi minus 1. Clearly, na? Look at this stage. If this is my ith subinterval, suppose somewhere here I am writing an ith subinterval, say xi minus 1 and xi. Therefore, this xi is giving me a suprema, correct? And xi minus 1 is giving me the infima. Therefore, we have written capital Mi is f of xi, small mi is f of xi minus 1. Now, I am going to consider the difference between the two sums, UPF minus LPF. May I write this as directly summation I equals to 1 to n capital Mi minus small mi into delta xi. But as we have found just now, capital Mi is f of xi, that of Small mi is f of xi minus 1 into delta xi. But what is delta xi we have selected? Length of the subinterval. May I say length of the subinterval is less than or equals to norm of the partition? Sorry, here what I want to change is, so simple change. Here we should not write with norm p less than delta. Here we will just add one statement considering the partition. Let us consider the partition P with norm P less than eta. Why I am selecting eta? Because epsilon and delta we want to use for the definition. Norm P less than delta. Sorry, so norm P less than eta. And if norm P is less than eta, what can I select? Delta xi less than or equals to norm P less than eta. Purposefully another symbol we have selected. Okay, let me put the value in the above equation. Thus, UPF minus LPF. Now may I write strictly less by summation f of xi minus f of xi minus 1 into eta. Eta is independent of I. We can take it outside the sum and just run up the sum over I. If I run up the sum over I, what is the first term? F of x1 minus f of x0. For I equals to 2, f of x2 minus f of x1. And continue this. For I equals to n, this is f of xn minus f of xn minus 1. Got it? Now we are going to cancel these terms. This term and this term is going to cancel. F of x2 cancel with the next term. This f of xn will cancel with its previous. So we left with only two terms. Which two terms? F of xn minus f of x0. F of xn minus f of x0. But we know xn is nothing but b. Therefore, shall I write this is f of b minus f of a. But what we want to prove? UPF minus LPF is less than
epsilon.
Epsilon. Therefore, how can I choose this delta eta number? Okay. Therefore, now write for epsilon greater than 0, choose eta greater than 0 such that. What such that? Eta into b minus a, fb minus fa is less than epsilon. If I do this, less than epsilon. If I do this, it gives us a number eta less than epsilon upon e of b minus e of a. Correct, na? But as the function is monotonically increasing, it may be possible that fa is equal to fb. Constant function is also a monotonically increasing function according to the definition. Therefore, there is a possibility to have fa is equal to fb, and if fa is equals to fb holds, whether such eta is going to exist. This number is not going to exist now because denominator gives me 0. But just to remove this confusion of denominator is being 0, what we will do? We will add a plus 1 here. We will add plus 1 here. Right? Therefore, what eta we have selected? We have selected eta less than epsilon upon fb minus fa plus 1. We will put it in the above statement. Therefore, the above statement becomes. What above statement is going to become now? UPF minus LPF less than. Now I am going to replace eta by epsilon upon this number. Epsilon upon fb minus fa plus 1 into fb minus fa. What about this number actually? fb minus fa upon fb minus fa plus 1. May I say the number is strictly less than by 1? Suppose I am taking fb minus fa is 10. Then what about the denominator? This is 10 plus 11, 10 plus 1, that is 11. Na? And this number is going to be less than 1 always. Therefore, may I say this number fb minus fa upon FB minus FA plus 1 is going to be less than 1 always. Less than 1 into epsilon, therefore together it gives me less than epsilon. Check whether you are getting me or not. Since FB minus FA upon FB minus FA plus 1 is less than 1 always. Okay, therefore the statement holds. One can say that hence f is integrable. Means a monotonically increasing function is integrable. Similarly, we can prove, I can change my state. Or similarly, f as monotonically decreasing is also integrable. Here f is monotonically increasing. No? What we have proved, both monotonically increasing and monotonically decreasing functions are integrable. Any doubt about today's lecture? You can ask me. Here the important job is to select a number eta always. In some books it was given a selection of eta in the initial steps also. You can write at the starting also, you can write at the middle step also whenever it is required. Okay. What will be a change if I write for decreasing? Simply this less equal we have to make greater equal. If mi values are going to be interchanged, capital Mi will be f of xi minus 1, small mi will be f of xi, and correspondingly you have to change the proof of the theorem. We are not going to repeat this again, and hence it is the proof of monotonic function is integrable. Therefore, the two important aspects we have proved in today's lecture, that every continuous function is integrable and every monotonic function is also integrable. We will stop for today. The next theorem we will see in the next lecture. Thank you for being with me in today's lecture.